does he know you inside and out, but he knows your future, he knows your past, he knows everything. He is omniscient. So I think that's another reason why we should trust him, is because he has a plan for us. He has a genuine plan for each and every single one of us. But I think this verse speaks to Moses' character, because he remembered to take Joseph's bones with him. So that just speaks to the teaching of the Israelites, how it was passed down from generation to generation, these words, and how they never forgot what Joseph had asked. So I feel like, in a way, this points to the Israelites not giving up hope, because they at least were like, one day we'll be able to take Joseph's bones out of Egypt. Even though they were in slavery and in these hard times, they still passed down the story. It was a glimmer of hope. Now I want to jump to the part of the pillar of cloud and fire. So God led the Israelites on their journey through the desert. By day he led them by a pillar of cloud, and by night it was a pillar of fire. And I've heard the theory that it might have been a volcano that was dormant and active, if you will. Or at least that's what would make sense to me. The weird part is that when they're fighting the Egyptians, when the Egyptians are coming after them, the pillar of cloud and fire goes behind them. It moves. Volcanoes don't usually move. Not that I know of, at least. So that kind of debunks my theory, because it's like, how could a volcano move unless the Israelites were led in a direction away from the volcano, so it looked like it went behind them. I'm not sure, but I would love to do a separate video on that. I think I could find, it's kind of like the scientific evidence behind Noah's flood. I'd like to kind of see what's out there for this and see if I could do a video on that, but we'll see. I'll see how much I can find, and then we'll go from there. But I thought it was kind of interesting how he led them through. Now I'm going to jump to Exodus 14, verses 10 through 12. It says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone? Let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Alright, so going back to my previous comment about God knowing them, didn't he say if they were faced by war they might change their minds? Literally, the next chapter in the Bible tells us about this. He knew. But also, I think we can relate to the Israelites in a number of ways. It's interesting to me how quickly the Israelites forgot how bad it was in Egypt. But I think we can relate to the Israelites in a lot of ways. And one of the ways that I'm going to call attention to is that they were saying before in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. To me, that sounds like you're setting your expectations short, and you're not fully encompassing what God can do. And I think most of us, or some of us, have done that before, where we ask, just found that interesting, I suppose. But continuing on, Exodus chapter 14, verse 13, Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid." We hear that phrase, "do not be afraid," a lot in the Bible, which is comforting in a way, because it means that a bunch of people before us have always been afraid. And I think it's natural when something big like that, or what we think is big, is coming down upon us, that we automatically have fear of it, or if not fear, concern or anxiety or worry about certain things in the future that could possibly happen. But always, God always answers, "Do not be afraid." Jump it down a little bit to verse 14. It says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." And I think that last part, "you need only to be still," is one of the hardest things to do, because I like to plan, and it is very difficult to do absolutely nothing, to be still and just wait. Now, that being said, this is not an excuse for apathy or laziness. That's not what this is saying. It's not saying sit on the couch and all your problems will be solved. No. This is saying for you to continue to make decisions every day. If you want a job, you have to apply for it. You can't just sit on the couch and it will magically happen. No. Apply for it. But when you've applied for it, don't panic about the outcome. If it's meant to be, it will be. God will take care of everything. God will get you through every situation you are in. You need only to be still and trust in Him, that He will fight for you. I find that extremely comforting to know. Jumping down to Exodus chapter 14, verse 31. It says, "And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in Him and in Moses his servant." And I want to call attention to this verse because I think it has a very important meaning. So here the Israelites saw what God did, and because they saw that He defeated the Egyptians, they feared God, they believed in Him. And I have written down, seeing is believing. But does it last? Later on in the New Testament, we see that Jesus performs lots of miracles. We even go to doubting Thomas, where he says, "Unless I put my hands where the scars were, I won't believe it." And then Jesus shows up and is like, "Hey," and automatically Thomas is like, no, it's okay, I believe. And Jesus is like, "No, do it." He says, "How much more is the person who believes without seeing?" They said in the New Testament that even some of the people who saw Jesus rise from the dead, they saw Him after He was crucified. It even says then some still did not believe. So I guess my challenge to you is, are you going to believe without seeing? Are you going to have faith? Are you going to have faith in God, who can part waters and lead an entire nation out of slavery? Just Just a thought. Just a thought. So in chapter 15, I'm going to briefly glaze over that. I only have 2 points really to make in this entire chapter. The first point is that songs are very important in the entire Bible. So constantly we see people singing songs of praise, and songs were like stories in a way. And something I just recently noticed, a lot of songs, Christian songs on the radio that I listen to, I'll be singing it, and then like the night after I'll be doing Bible study, and I read a Bible verse that song literally mimicked word for word, literally copied it, and I know the verse by heart just because of the song. And I think because it was in a song, it's easier to remember. Kind of like the ABCs, you can't really, or at least it's very difficult for me to remember the ABCs without singing the song. It's easier to remember, and I think that's part of the reason why there are so many songs in the Bible, is because this is how tradition's passed on. You remember these songs, you remember, oh, God did this for us. There's constant reminders that God was doing things and will do things for the Israelites. So I think it's important to notice that songs have power, or songs have meaning, especially in the Bible. And we see even in the New Testament, Mary sings a song after she knows that Jesus is the Son of God and that she's going to give birth to him. So it's not just right here, it's all throughout the Bible. The whole book of Psalms is a bunch of songs that mostly King David wrote, but also other authors contributed as well. The second point in chapter 15, it's chapter 15, verse 20. Miriam, which is Moses and Aaron's sister, is referred to as the prophet. And I think this holds a meaning, because before we had seen where God had made an analogy that Moses was going to be like God, and Aaron was going to be like his prophet. But here we see Miriam as a prophet. I found that interesting. I found that noteworthy. Skipping down a little bit into chapter 16, verse 35, we see the Israelites ate manna 40 years until they came to a land that was settled. 40 years of the same food over and over again. And that's not the only thing. We see that the Israelites grumble a lot. We see that Moses writes about them grumbling a lot. I'm sure they didn't grumble all the time, but in these series of events, it sounds like they argue a lot with Moses. But what's interesting to me is that God says he's going to give them a portion of manna each day, and on the 6th day he gives them 2 portions of manna, so that on the 7th day they can rest, right? Because we know that on the 7th day it's observed as a resting time, and back in those days, and even today, some religious individuals I think that's kind of funny that God even explained it to them, and yet they still did it. They're like children in a way, or even like us, adults even do the same thing. Told not to, and we still do it. Jumping around, we're going to Exodus chapter 17, verse 10, and the reason I jumped to this is because we meet a very important character. His name is Joshua, and Joshua will become important later on for sure, but I think this is the first introduction we get to Joshua, and we find that Joshua is a warrior, a soldier. There's actually an entire book of the Bible named Joshua. So, like I said, he's a very important character in the Bible, and we'll get to him more. But some of you may recall Joshua in the walls of Jericho. That's him. So Joshua, pay attention to anything regarding Joshua, because like I said, he'll become important later on. The last but not least point that I want to cover is in Exodus 18 with Jethro. I love Jethro. He is so awesome. I think it's important to notice that the Bible repeats that Jethro is a father-in-law. It refers to him as father-in-law sometimes. And I think this is to show that we shouldn't write off our in-laws altogether. I know sometimes it can be difficult. However, Jethro ends up helping Moses exponentially. Now, granted, Jethro also respects Moses. Jethro not only offers advice, but he also is happy with Moses and sad with Moses. And Moses obviously trusts him. I could probably do an entire thing on just Jethro, but I wanted to call attention to verse 10 in chapter 18. He said, "Praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods." I think this is important because we see and we know that Jethro is not Jewish. Jethro is essentially a Gentile, which means he's not Jewish. And yet, he spread thin. Spread very thin because he's having